Welcome to the Senior Woman Leader podcast, presented by NAIA RISE. RISE is about respect, inclusivity, support, and education. The NAIA Senior Woman Leaders are the highest ranking females within NAIA athletics departments, and this podcast is dedicated to develop our female administrators specifically in leadership and management of college sports. Connect, learn, and grow. This is our November Lunch and Learn for our senior women leaders and athletics administrators and coaches and anybody else that just wants to learn on today's topic, which is building a positive culture in athletics. And we are honored to have today Dr. Darin Wilson from Georgia Gwinnett, and home of the Grizzlies and one of the most amazing tennis teams ever. So, Dr. Wilson, I would love to just open it up to you and kick us off.
Well, Paige, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the invite. I consider it an honor to be here. And anytime I get to speak on behalf of Georgia Gwinnett or for the NAIA or to the NAIA or with fellow leaders, I really appreciate that. So thank you. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I think probably as an athletics director, as an athletics administrator, there's nothing more important to me than building a great culture. And I know we threw the word in positive here. I love a positive culture. Life's not always positive, but I think if we're being honest with each other, if we're transparent, if we're doing the things that we need to do each and every day, then I think our culture is the thing that really holds us together in good times and in bad times. I've been fortunate over my career to be at two institutions as an athletics director, two completely different institutions. And so as you're on the webinar today and you're kind of listening to some of the things that I'm going to say, I want you to know I've been at a small private where that institution was 125 years old at the time I was there. We celebrated 100 years of athletics. I took over a department that at the time was kind of in disarray. So we had to build that culture back. I'll talk a little bit about here in just a second. And now I'm at an institution that's got 13,000 students. It's a public institution, and we've built this department from scratch over the last 12 years. So two completely different places. But a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about today, if not all of them, resonate at both places equally as well. And so as you listen, as you participate today, regardless if you're in the chair right now, you're in some chair. So wherever you fit in the organization, I think there are things that you'll be able to take back and implement as you continue to develop on this path in collegiate athletics. So let's go on. I think one of the first things that I kind of have thought about, and you can go on to the next slide, is, what is important here? What is important? You want to make sure, and I kind of have broken this thing down to three different points, if you will, because I know people like points, but one of the most important things that I think you can bring to the table is yourself. And it's to be yourself. And if you go on to that next slide, we're going to talk through some of these things and what does that really mean? And one of the things that I want to hit on here early on is, I'm sure that you all get up in the morning and you're probably like I am. You may do a little quiet time. You may do some exercise, but at some point in this day and age, you're probably scrolling, right? You're on Twitter, you're on Instagram. And you can find every guru out there that's going to tell you the right and the wrong way to do something, right? You listen to one person, they say you got to be up at 5 a.m. in the morning. You listen to the next person, they say, oh, just sleep in. You don't have to be up at 5 a.m. in the morning. You can get things done in the afternoon. One of the things that I want you to take away from today is there's no right or wrong way to build a positive culture in an athletics department. There's just not. Now, there are some key tenets that I'm going to share that I think are important. Maybe they're important to you. Maybe they're not as important to you, but you have to figure out more so than anything else who you are, what you believe in, and what you want to put out in the forefront of building or being in your department. You are uniquely you. No one knows you better than you. And I think at times we try to bring all of these traits or all of these ideas from all of these different places, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out what works best for you. And I put in here, learn from others, but don't try to be somebody you're not. And I learned this a long time ago. I was named a head baseball coach at small NAIA college years ago at 25. So I was actually playing with two guys that I are coaching now, the head coach, two guys that I had played with the year before. And so you can imagine what that was like. Well, I'd had several different influences in my life. And so I was trying to be like them or be them as a young coach, and it just doesn't work, right? You've got to find your own voice. You've got to find who you are. You've got to be yourself. What do you value? And bring those each and every day. And I spend a little time on this because I don't think it's talked about near enough. Because we talk about all of these things that you can do and all these different programming and all these different types of, influences that you can bring. But I really believe at the end of the day, if you're comfortable in your own skin and you're comfortable with who you are, then you can lead your department. You can lead whatever area you have within your department the best that you can because you're doing it from a genuine, authentic place. So be you. One of the things that I've mentioned here at the end is, what are your non-negotiables? There are going to be some things that you're going to bump up against, right, in your leadership and in how you want to build culture and how you want to embrace positivity and how you want to embrace the people that you lead. And there are going to be some things that within our individual programs that I will let go. And I'll be like, you know what? I wouldn't do that myself. It wouldn't be the thing that I would do, but it's not a non-negotiable for me. Our staff knows and has learned over the years that I have some non-negotiables. And I think when you're leading well, that those types of questions tend to kind of diminish as you go along, because they're going to, within themselves, they're going to be like, oh, he's not going to go for that. That's not part of what we do here. And so I think part of that is learning who you are, learning what you want to bring, and learning what you want to bring to your institution. So for us, when we talk about non-negotiables and negotiables and what really matters to us, we kind of try to live by this mantra of everything matters. And I put a sign up at our facility. We've got kind of two tiers, and most of our athletes are on the first floor. And so at the very end of the hallway, they see these two words every single day that they're down there. And I talk about this with our staff in that everything matters. And some of you might be going, well, how can everything matter? There's so much going on. Well, I'm not saying that everything is going to be at a certain standard every single day, but everything can still matter. And so what does that look like for us? So what that looks like for us is we want to make sure that we're conducting ourselves right on the field. We want to make sure we're conducting ourselves right in the classroom. We want to make sure our facilities are in great shape. And you say, well, how does that build into a positive culture? Well, to me, if we take pride in what we've been entrusted with, and we truly embrace everything that goes from the uniforms that we're choosing, goes from how we communicate with people, goes with how we're treating people, so with how we're, just each and everything, how we deal with trash, on the campus. Are we picking up trash? Are we leaving things around? Everything to us matters. And I'll tell this quick story. My office, you can kind of see the back of it, but to the left, I overlook our baseball facility. And I've got windows in my office. And for about a week, this water bottle, you can kind of see it, set down right below my window. And I watched countless of our people walk by it. Our people that are supposed to clean it up walk by it. Our players walk by it. Our staff walks by it. And finally, about 3 or 4 days in, I go down and I pick it up. And I start our next staff meeting with this sitting on the lectern that I was in front of our staff. And I think most of them in the room probably knew what was coming. They didn't know how it had gotten there, but they knew there was going to be a story there. And the story literally was, if we're going to leave that sign up, and if we're going to embrace and we're going to agree that everything matters, then somebody should pick this bottle up throughout the week. And so it's just a gentle reminder that if we're going to say it, if we're going to preach it, if we're going to talk it, then we should also walk it. So everything matters. So be yourself. You got to be you. All right. So as we move on, probably the thing that I spend the most time on is building trust. How do you build trust? Do you build trust throughout your organization? You build trust with your people. But go to the next slide. And as you think about building trust, right? And this was my quote: people will not follow you because of what you say, they follow what they see. Right? Just because you've got a title, just because you tell them, they're not going to follow that. They might for a little while. They may say, oh yeah, she's got the title, she's in this position, she's such and such. But if I continually say one thing and do something else, they're not going to follow that person. They follow what they see. And so we want to build trust each and every day. So how do we build trust? Right? Trust is earned every day. I think trust is earned every single day. How do you begin to do that? You do what you say you're going to do every time. If you stand up in front of people, if you're in a one-on-one and you tell them you're going to do something,
Siouxland Urology up in Sioux Falls,
then that's what you're going to do, right? That's what you're going to do every single time. Now, here's something that I put in as well, because I think this is important. If something changes, tell them. Just be honest. Speak the truth. So many times we will say something and then something will change. Something happens on campus, something out of your control, and you come back, or I come back, or we come back, or you see it somewhere, and they just kind of brush it under the rug, or they think, well, I hope this goes away. I hope this doesn't come back around. No, say, you know what? I told you this. This is what I thought at the time. This was based on the best information that I had, and it changed. And I need to be upfront with you and tell you that. Your staff will appreciate that. Your staff will grow towards you in that moment. They will not push away from you. They may not like it, right? We have to have hard conversations at sometimes, but they will grow towards you because you have been honest with them. You've told them that something had to change. In the same tone, show up as your best self every day. When you get up, when you get out of bed, you come to the office, you have to go to a meeting, you go to an event, show up as your best self. Show them that you're your best self. When you're not your best self, when you're struggling, again, I'm vulnerable enough within these walls that I can tell our staff, look, man, I'm struggling today. This is kind of what's going on, or I may not have to tell them what's going on, but I'm just not my best self. Give me a pass today. I'll be back tomorrow. They will appreciate that. You will build that trust with them. Everyone, and I've done this from day one in my programs. Everyone and every team that you have matter. No one's above the program. No one's above the institution. Paige was very nice to say great things about our tennis program here. We've got 2 great tennis programs. They're not above any other program. Our baseball program's not above any other program. Our men's team's not above a women's team. Our women's team's not above a men's team. We try to treat them as equally and as well and as fairly as we possibly can. And your coaches will respect that. If you make time to deal with the minor, if you will, sports the same way, or at least in a competitive way that you do your major level sports, that will help build that positivity and that culture each and every day as well. So here's some things that you can actually do, right? Here's some things that you can actually do, and that's get out of your office. And I know that can be hard. Here currently we've got 6 sports, so it's much easier for me to be able to get out and do and talk. But when I was at Union, we had 23 sports when I left. And so you have to just do, and I kind of say the hard stuff, and that's like getting out of your office. Go see and go meet them where they are. Some of the most productive conversations that I have, and some of the best conversations that I have in building that internal culture, is when I'm not in my office, when I'm not in this chair, when there's not this big desk between me and whoever I'm talking to. It's when I go to their office, when I get in their space. So do that. Meet with your staff when there is no agenda. You just like to show up. They've got some time. Maybe it's some water cooler talk. Maybe it's some coffee talk, but you've just got some time to talk to them, and you do that. I think this is a great question to ask yourself, and especially if you're already in a position of leadership. And if you're not in that position, if you only hear from your boss or your leader when you're in trouble, that should be a ding ding for you. Does your staff, when you say, hey, I'd love to meet with you, do they automatically think they're in trouble? That doesn't build that culture that you want. I want our staff, when I say, hey, can I meet with you? Yeah, maybe they've still got that, oh, is something going on? But I want them to think, oh, that this, I'm not in trouble. And I think so many times, especially in higher education, especially at smaller institutions, we get so busy, it's not necessarily anyone's fault. But when you get that email, you get that text, the first thing you go to is, am I in trouble? And that doesn't promote that great culture. So I want you to think about that. Think about when you send emails, think about when you send texts. Do you only speak to certain staff members when they are in trouble? And maybe there are some times that you can say, you know what, I need to do this and throw some positivity out there to them. Just throw them some things that let them know that the only time they hear from me is not either when I want something or when they're in trouble. Make sure that they know that you have their back, especially publicly. There are things that you have to talk about behind closed doors that maybe they messed up. Maybe they did something that, does not fit within the way that you like to run things, or maybe it doesn't even fit with the way the institution likes to run things. And behind closed doors, you need to do that. But publicly, try to have your folks back. That will go a long way, again, with building that trust, building that camaraderie, building that community. And then do things together outside of the office. We like to host a staff holiday party. We like to do some things after work occasionally. There are a lot of different things that you can do with your staff. You, again, have to find that place that fits you best. There are going to be some things that some members of my staff who might be on here have begged me to do that I'm just not going to do because it's not me. They would love for me to do it, but I'm not doing it. So again, that's knowing you. But there are other things that, you can come up with. Maybe you come up together as a staff and you do things outside of the office. Again, build that camaraderie, build that trust together. So one of the things that I like to think about too, especially when you're getting out of your office, you're meeting with those folks, is find out what really makes them tick. I think so many times we get so caught up in the athletics piece that we forget about the personal piece. And really I think in this profession and particularly at the NAIA small college level, I think it's so important to get to know our staffs other than just their coach X or administrator Y, that they're real people. And you find out, what makes them tick. What are their kids' names? What are their interests outside of athletics? Several years ago, I had all of our staff, I gave them one assignment for a staff meeting, and we split it up throughout the entire year. But their charge was they had to present on a topic that they loved that had nothing to do with athletics. And it became so interesting because we learned about wine, and we learned about some bourbon, and we learned about farming, we learned about crocheting, we learned all kinds of things about our particular staff that we would have never known had they not done that activity. I made them do a PowerPoint, so they had to come up with a PowerPoint. It was just like they would present to their teams or to us on an athletics piece or on a leadership piece. But the deal was you couldn't do anything that had to do with athletics. So you can imagine too, as that kind of transpired, and then as the years go by, people remember that. People remember that, oh, they like XYZ. Oh, they have this interest outside of here. And I think that's really something that's pretty cool. And so a lot of this stuff goes into kind of the last one before the final one. And that's really just showing that you care. Show them that you care. When people know, when your staff knows that you genuinely care about them, it becomes easier, I think, to have those difficult conversations when you have to have them. I never think someone should be surprised unless they've done something egregious. I never think someone should be surprised when they're getting fired. I never think someone should be surprised when, you're having to bring them in for the third time because you've had the conversation if you've done the work on the front end. And part of the work on the front end is letting people know that you genuinely care. The reason we're having this conversation is because I care about, if I didn't care about you, we wouldn't have had this conversation. You wouldn't still be here, those types of things. And so I think that is really important for people as you move along. So, all right, what's next? All right.
So quick question,
Go ahead,
Darin.
Paige. I couldn't see that. I saw something pop up, but I couldn't see
okay.
it.
That was me. I just thought that was such a cool idea. And I just want to ask, did you have them present on campus or off campus?
So for this particular one, we've done both. So we'll do at the beginning of our year, we do an off-campus event where we bring everybody together and we kind of do our normal, this is who we are at GGC. These are the expectations, so on and so forth. Well, we also have bi-weekly staff meetings. And so what we did is we would get the business out of the way, and then we would go right into that staff meeting. So it was on campus. It was in our normal meeting room. And it was really cool. I mean, and we made them all do it. We were fortunate because of the size staff. We had head coaches and assistant coaches do it. But it could be something where you just have, some head coaches do it. Maybe you pick different ones throughout the year or whatever. But that was a real neat thing, even for me, who I think know our staff as well as anybody, to find out stuff that I had no idea about.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks. Sure. All right. And so finally, empower your people. So empower your people. So what does that mean? We go to that next slide. What does empower your people mean? And if you ever hear me speak about hiring or about this, I will always start with the first bullet point, and that is to hire well. Because I think if you work hard to hire well on the front end, not all this stuff takes care of itself, but a lot of it takes care of itself. And it's more difficult for sure if you're in more of a rural situation, you're in even a smaller setting. I get that. I've been there. I ran you were talking about our tennis program at my former institution. We had a tennis search one time, and I tell people I had 1.5 applicants. There was really 2, but the one you couldn't even hire. So it was like you had 1 applicant. And so it becomes difficult in those situations if that person doesn't meet the criteria that you're looking for. But when you're looking at building culture, if you do the work on the front end and you're able to hire well, our current baseball coach is a great example. He's the master of positivity. I mean, he brings this stuff every single day. And I did all kinds of vetting before we hired him. And he could tell you some stories that I, looked through and made phone calls and all that, because I wanted to make sure we made the right hire, because I wanted him to come into this culture that we've already established and do well, and also enhance what we already have. The last thing I want is someone to just come in and just kind of, float along. I want somebody to come in and enhance what we do, which kind of goes to the next bullet point, right? Allow your staff some autonomy. You still steer the ship, you're in charge, but allow them some autonomy in what they like to do. We've got, somebody that does some external fundraising for us and does, a lot of the rah-rah stuff, you will, does a lot of the fan stuff and fan engagement. If you know me very well, I'm not a rah-rah guy. It's just not me. There are a lot of people that are rah-rah people and they do well, and bless them, I love them, but it's not me. And it is him. And so I have to allow him to do some things and allow our fans to do some things and our students to do some things that maybe for me, I'm like, makes me cringe a little bit, but it's nothing that's outside of what I believe in. It just not real comfortable for me. So we have to allow them some of that autonomy. Also goes back to the first point about being yourself. I know me and I know who I am. It doesn't mean I don't want to stretch. We'll talk a little bit about stretching in a minute, but I know who I am at the core. And so that's why too, when you're thinking about hiring, will you surround yourself with people who are better than you, or you surround yourself with people who bring different things to the party, bring different things to the institution than what you do. With your staff, find out about their long-term professional goals. What are some things that they want to do? What do they aspire to be? Do they aspire to be an AD? Some people don't. Some people love what they're doing in the role they're in. Some people would love to be in a different role within your department. You need to know that. Maybe sometime that will make sense. How can you help them reach their goals while still building that culture in your department? We've had people over the years that were in a certain role, and I've got a guy right now who loves the social media aspect of things. He is so good at editing. And if you follow our Instagram account, you'll see a lot of his work. I don't pay him for that, but he loves it. And so I create some space with his quote unquote normal job to allow him to be able to do that, because that's a creative outlet for him. It's something that he likes to do, and he's very, very, very good at it. Brings value to us, brings value to our culture, brings value to him, brings value to the people around him. It's a win-win. So figure out, how do you utilize their strengths? Are there other areas where someone can bring value? Are there other areas where you could bring value and you've not told your AD that? Maybe that's something you could think about. And you say, well, he or she's not going to be, they don't like to empower, they don't like, that's fine. You can still internally know the things that you like to do, and you can go, okay, how can I figure this out sort of in spite of him or her? What can I do to help enhance my chances of advancing in our department or advancing in another department? And then the last kind of on this bullet point is put people in positions to succeed, but stretch their skill set. We've got a great example here. A guy who's now one of our assistant ADs, who's about to retire. He had a complete different career. He was a music composer by trade, and the music composing business at the time wasn't going great, and his wife was an outstanding fundraiser. And anyway, he was kind of raising the 3 kids, and she was working remote, and he lived literally right down the street from our campus where we were building this athletics department from scratch. And he came over and he said, hey, could I volunteer? Well, 12 years ago, we had all kinds of people knocking on our door, either wanting to volunteer or wanting a job. And I'm like, sure. And I kind of sent him to another person in our department and said, hey, can you, take care of it? Well, long story short, this is one of my favorite people in the entire world. And we kept kind of promoting him, and he's now one of our assistant ADs. But he loved to compose music. He's a very good trumpet player. He hated to speak in front of people. So what did I do? I put him in charge of our conference tournaments. And the first year, I did everything. I went and I spoke to the coaches. He was just there facilitating, and I did the whole thing. Well, year 2, I said, all right, this is all you. I'll be here in support, but I'm not leading the coaches meeting, and he about broke out in hives, scared to death. And 10 years later, he's like, man, this is easy. It's like, it's clockwork. We know what we're doing. And I said, isn't it interesting how that doesn't even affect you now, going to speak in front of these coaches and speak in front of, because you've been stretched. You know what you know. You're more confident in yourself. And so put those people that are around you, in those positions to succeed, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to stretch their skill set. All right. And I used to teach, I don't teach this particular class, but I used to teach a class several years ago on athletics administration. And the one thing I would tell them at the very beginning of the class, I said, you're going to learn one key element from me. And if you don't learn anything else, I want you to remember this, because I'm going to talk about it over and over and over again. Of course, they all, real quiet, and they look at you and they're like, what is it? This is going to be some really, great information. And I say basically that I use the word well. I put effectively in this because I thought it sounded better, but I say learn to delegate well. Learn to delegate effectively. And I put it in that context because people will hear the word delegate and they think you're just trying to get out of work. And that's not it at all. What delegation is it's allowing, again, some other staff member to be able to grow. It's allowing that other staff member to be able to succeed or at times be able to fail without you sitting right there and being under their skin or under their wings, right? And so when I like to delegate to folks, I don't just put them out there on an island and say, good luck. I will delegate and then I'll say, hey, how do you feel about this? Are you comfortable with this? How can I help? How can I support you? And if I've done this with, the same person a couple different times, they'll kind of get how I am and how I operate and how I work. And they'll go, I got it. I'll come back if I need you. I'm like, great. And then they'll come and they'll check in and I'll check back in. But being able to do that is how you grow your people. And it's how you learn to build that culture. It's how you learn to keep people engaged. People don't want to do the same thing every day, right? They don't want to do the same thing every day. And those that do, maybe it's time for you to step in and say, hey, how can we stretch? Don't be a micromanager. I say from day one, I try to be the type of boss. I try to be the leader that I'd want to work for. I do not want to be micromanaged. So just stay away from that. That does not build culture. I can tell you that builds this whole, not good culture that you want. Expect the best from people. If you can start to expect the best and instead of expecting the worst, good things tend to happen. And then finally, I think this nugget too is important is to be curious. Be curious. Are there things that this person is bringing to the table that maybe we ought to think about? Maybe there's a better way. I've done it this way for 25 years. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a way that we can embrace what they're bringing to the table. Maybe not, but at least be curious enough to listen to their ideas. And then I love this. So I've said this for several years now. I'm as hands-off as I can be and as hands-on as I have to be. When things are going well and when I've done a great job with our department and I've done a great job growing our people, growing our coaches, we're in a really good space culturally. I don't have to be very hands-on. That's the kind of world I like to live in. I like to set the direction, set the target. You all go do what you do and go do it well. And I will stay out of the way. But if it's a situation where we're having something come up over and over and over again, then I dig in and I get in there and I have to be a little more or a lot more hands-on than I want to be. But the way I love to lead is to be as hands-off as I can be. And I think that's important as you move forward. So 3 things: you be you, build trust, empower your people. That's what I've got. So,
awesome. Well, let's open it up for some questions. Let's open it up to, I am looking at faces right now and knowing that you all also probably have some great nuggets to share. So don't be shy, be you, trust in this group that you can say it, and empower your people by sharing your knowledge. I don't have to call on somebody.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. Darin, fantastic job. For those, Darnell Smith, Athletic Director at Texas A&M University, San Antonio. Hey, Darin, if you could, as we talk about what a positive culture, could you speak to within that culture, how do you manage like difficult or crucial conversations to also navigate through that and also maintain a positive culture?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and probably one of the most challenging things that we have as administrators. For me, especially building those relationships early on and having those touch points are key. I think once you've been with someone for a while and they do trust you, it's easier to come in and I'll be, especially at this stage in my career, I'll just be frank and say, man, we've got to talk about something that you're not going to like, or we've got to talk about something that's probably not going to go real well for you, but I'm hoping there's a way that we can move through this. Or, you can always go and use the sandwich effect, right? You tell them something good, you tell them the negative in the middle, and then you tell them something good. I think it depends on what that difficult conversation is. I think the more ramped up that is, so if it's a difficult conversation and we got a scale of 0 to 10 and we're at about an 8, I'm probably going to be a little more direct than I am the sandwich method. So I think it's about building that trust over time, and people know that even if you have to have a conversation that they're not going to like, it doesn't mean it's about them as a person. This is about the behavior, or this is about the thing that we've got to move through. It doesn't mean that I don't still love you. It doesn't mean that I don't still like you. It doesn't mean that I don't still want you to be here. But we've got this challenge that we've got to move through.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Darin.
Thank you. That's a great question.
Anybody else want to ask a question?
Well, Paige, I will take an opportunity if I may just jump in. I always got questions.
Yeah.
So, Darin, one of the things we talked about in a previous webinar was regarding international student athletes. If you could speak to and creating a space of belonging for those, if you could you share with us in essence regarding like positive culture, how do you navigate creating spaces or belonging for international students within your campus?
Yeah, great question. We're fortunate here. I mean, our campus as a whole is one of the most diverse campuses in the country, and athletically, we have a large number of international students that are athletes. I will say Dr. Ian Potter, who works for me, does a great job working with our international students. He's the one that kind of has the touch points with them, whether it's classes or whether it's helping them navigate when they first get on campus. We actually have an internationalization office on campus that works with them as well. We'll help them acclimate to campus, acclimate to the Atlanta area, kind of figure out how to get around when they first get here. But one of the things I think we do is we really try to treat them just like everybody else. Like we try to just embrace them and bring them in and make them a Grizzly from day one and say, we're here to support you. We're here to help you. Let me know how I can help and how I can share. I'll tell you this story on myself, and again, just trying to be honest and vulnerable to our teammates or our players as well. I was meeting with our men's soccer team earlier in the year. It was very, first meeting. I go in and just kind of talk to them about the tenets of being a Grizzly, and we're glad you're here and all that. And a couple of weeks before, one of our men's soccer players had I was taking my Jeep to get serviced, and he was the guy behind the counter that was checking me out. He had a summer job, and that's what he was doing. I had no idea who he was. No idea. And he goes, Dr. Wilson, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I didn't recognize you're not in uniform. I see a bunch of different people, blah, blah, blah. So I told our men's team that story. I said, look, if I don't come up to you and speak to you, it's not because I'm trying to be rude or I'm trying to be mean or I'm unapproachable. I just might not know who you are. I said, so you tell me, which is exactly what he did. He said, and I said, I appreciate that. So it's really, and I encourage our athletes to come by my office. Sometimes I have to shut my door because they come by too much. But I really want them to feel like, this is a welcoming place. And if I can do anything to help them that's within my power, I'll try. And some of that, Darnell, is for me to send them down to Ian's office and say, man, that's not me, that's Ian, because he knows how to do that stuff. So we just try to embrace them and love them up.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
We had a question come in from Erica. She asked, do you see differences in building trust and belonging with your GAs versus your assistant coaches and versus head coaches?
It's a good question. I probably, it has certainly been easier for me historically to build that relationship with head coaches. It's been easier. I have to work harder to build it with our assistant coaches. Now here it's a little easier for me because we've got 6 programs, we got 5 assistant coaches. I've been able to do that pretty easy. At Union, I had 40 some staff members. We had all kinds of GAs. And so much more challenging in that. But yeah, I think it's a matter of, go back to kind of what I said earlier, it's a matter of priorities. What's a priority for you? I love to try to help our we have a lot of volunteers here. So I like to help our volunteers find a path. We've got a guy who's one of our assistant ADs now that, well, two of them actually both started as volunteers, and both just came and worked and worked and worked. So I built that relationship with them as a volunteer. But no, that's a great question. I think the larger the staff is and the more, you're dealing with, certainly the harder it is to have that intimate type relationship that you would like to have. But it is a matter of where, where do you put your priorities? And sometimes I'd say this too, both Ian and Dion, who worked for me in different capacities, because of who they are around more, it's easier for them to kind of build that relationship with them. So they're still getting a touch point with a senior leader. It just may not be me.
So Dr. Wilson, again, thank you so much for everything today. Thank you everybody here for taking your time. Again, just know that we've got these on Spotify, Apple, and our YouTube playlist. So you can grab nuggets over and over if you didn't catch everything today.
Thank you all. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.